Have you ever wondered why some people seem to attract prosperity so easily, while others struggle every day and never get anywhere? Have you ever felt like no matter how hard you try, money just slips through your fingers? Well, Sebastian Mitchell felt the same way. For years, he believed that luck was a privilege only for others. He worked hard, did what he could, but lived trapped in a cycle of bills, debt, and frustration. Until one day, tired of it all, he decided to try something different, something he'd previously thought was just fantasy, the law of attraction. And that's exactly when his life began to change. What you'll hear today is the story of an ordinary man who discovered an extraordinary power within himself, a power capable of transforming scarcity into abundance, fear into faith, and the impossible into reality. A story that shows that thriving isn't a matter of luck, it's a matter of the mind. Oh, and before we begin this inspiring journey, tell me one thing. Are you subscribed to the channel yet? If not, please subscribe, like, and comment here where in the world you're listening to this story from. This way, you'll help this message reach more people who are also ready to change their lives. Sebastian Mitchell's story will remind you of something powerful. Everything you seek out there starts within you. Sebastian Mitchell used to wake up before sunrise, not out of choice, but out of necessity. The alarm clock was an uncomfortable reminder that another day of struggle awaited him. The bills piled on the table formed a kind of silent mural of his worries. He looked at them and felt the weight of life on his shoulders, as if he constantly carried something he could never put down. Sometimes he'd walk the streets, observing well-dressed people, smiling as if they'd discovered a secret he didn't know. There was a knot in his chest, a mixture of envy and discouragement that made him believe prosperity was an exclusive club. And he didn't have an invitation. Opportunities seemed to pass before him, beckoning, but always leaving too quickly. On paydays, Sebastian would delude himself for a few hours, imagining that this time he'd be able to balance everything. But all it took was paying a bill, covering a loan, and buying the essentials, and the money would disappear like sand through his fingers. At night, he'd lie down exhausted, trying to ignore the nagging voice in his head that told him, "You're not cut out for this." It was a cycle that seemed never-ending. The feeling of being stuck in an invisible gear made him restless. He worked, he struggled, he did everything right, and yet nothing changed. It was like running on a treadmill, always moving, but never moving. And deep down, he was beginning to believe that perhaps destiny really did have limits for certain types of people. But no matter how hard he tried to accept it, there was a part of him that refused to accept that reality, a silent flame that stubbornly refused to be extinguished, even with the cold wind of hardship. And unbeknownst to him, it was precisely this small spark that would lead him down a path he never imagined he'd travel. Sebastian's days all seemed the same, a tiresome repetition of tasks that no longer made sense. He would wake up, drink a weak coffee, and rush to work, feeling like he was always late for something he couldn't explain. On the crowded bus, he would look out the window and see the city speeding by, while his life seemed stuck in the same spot. It was as if time was pushing him forward, but he remained stuck in the same place. At work, he did everything, and then some, to prove he deserved a better chance. But recognition never came. The hours dragged by. The clock seemed to mock him, and every minute was a reminder that his energy was being exchanged for survival, not fulfillment. The paycheck at the end of the month was just a short respite before the next plunge into debt. By the time he got home, he was so exhausted he could barely think. He'd lie down with his head full of numbers, bills, and worries. His mind wouldn't stop, even in the silence of the early morning. He wondered when the weight would lift, when life would begin to smile back. But the only sound he heard was the echo of his own doubts. Sometimes he'd stare at the ceiling and try to convince himself that it was all part of a process, that one day things would get better. But fatigue was treacherous. It sapped hope, stole the sparkle from his eyes, and left only the feeling of fighting against something much bigger than himself. Still, Sebastian followed step by step like someone walking in a desert without knowing where the oasis is. And it was in the midst of these comings and goings of gray days that something began to change. At first imperceptibly, like a light breeze that precedes the change in weather. From a young age, Sebastian heard phrases that, over time, became truths in his mind. His father said that money only came with sweat and sacrifice, and that effort wasn't always enough. His mother, with a heart full of good intentions, would repeat that poor people are born to suffer, as if trying to prepare her son for a hard life. And he grew up believing this, unaware that those words had planted deep roots within him. These beliefs followed him like silent shadows. Even when he tried to dream, something inside him said, "It's no use." It was as if an invisible barrier stood between him and prosperity, a wall made of old phrases, fears, and repetitions. He tried hard, but his mind seemed to pull him back, constantly reminding him that success was a privilege for the few. When he saw someone prosper, his first reaction was to think that person must be lucky, connected, or have some special gift. He never saw himself as someone capable of achieving the same. And this thought, repeated so many times, became a comfortable prison, a place where he didn't need to take risks, but also couldn't evolve. Deep down, Sebastian didn't realize he was the one holding the chains. The words he once heard had become mental walls, preventing him from seeing beyond. He lived inside a story written by others, unaware that he had the power to rewrite every line. But everything began to change when, amidst this fog of limitations, a new idea crossed his path, something that seemed too simple to be real, but which awakened a curiosity he could no longer ignore. One night, Sebastian came home after a particularly difficult day. The company had cut overtime, and he knew his next paycheck wouldn't cover all his expenses. He sat on the couch, turned on the dim living room light, and stared into space. The bills were there, scattered across the table, a cruel reminder of what still needed to be resolved. That's when he felt a lump in his throat, followed by a heavy silence that seemed to scream inside him. He tried to remain calm, but the tears came, quietly, contained, as if apologizing for existing. For the first time, Sebastian admitted to himself that he was tired of fighting, tired of trying and seeing no results, tired of pretending everything was fine. His heart tightened with the feeling of helplessness, and his mind spun in circles, repeating the same questions that never had answers. That night, he picked up a small mirror from the bookshelf and stared into his own eyes. "Why doesn't anything change?" he whispered. "What am I doing wrong?" The reflection seemed strange, an ordinary man, exhausted, but with something different in his eyes, a glimmer of nonconformity. It was as if, behind the weariness, there was a hidden strength, begging to be heard. It was at that moment that something inside him began to stir. A spark, almost imperceptible, but enough to break the torpor he was living in. He realized that perhaps the problem wasn't just external. Perhaps the real battle was taking place within him, in his beliefs, his thoughts, in the way he saw the world. And as the living room clock struck midnight, Sebastian sensed this could be the end of a story, or the first chapter of a new journey. He didn't yet know which, but something deep inside told him the answer was about to arrive. The next morning, something different lingered in the air. Sebastian woke up, still feeling the weight of the previous night, but there was a new restlessness within him, a silent desire to find answers. He picked up his phone, unsure of what he was looking for, and began browsing random videos. Until, among so many titles, one caught his eye: "The Power of Thoughts to Change Your Reality." He clicked, without much expectation, but those words would change everything. The narrator's calm voice spoke of energy, vibration, and the power of the mind to attract what one desires. It seemed strange at first, almost too fanciful. But as he listened, something about it began to make sense. It was as if each sentence unlocked a forgotten memory, a wisdom that had always been there, just waiting to be recognized. "You create what you believe," the video said, and that phrase echoed in Sebastian's head. Curious, he dove headfirst into this new universe. He sought out books, lectures, and stories of people who had transformed their lives through what they called the law of attraction. The more he studied, the more he realized a pattern. Everyone started believing before seeing. And for the first time, Sebastian wondered if perhaps he had lived his whole life waiting to see before believing. For the next few days, he couldn't think of anything else. The idea that thoughts shape reality seemed too simple, yet too powerful to ignore. What if it's true? He wondered. What if I really can change everything? This curious doubt turned into hope, a feeling he hadn't felt in a long time. It was then that Sebastian made a silent but powerful decision. He would try. No promises, no guarantees, just a genuine desire to see where this new vision could take him. And little did he know, the universe was already beginning to respond. In the early days of this new discovery, Sebastian still didn't know what to feel. Part of him wanted to believe that the law of attraction could change his life. But another part, the more stubborn one, whispered, "Don't fool yourself. This is fantasy." He'd already been disappointed so many times that the simple act of dreaming seemed dangerous. After all, each broken hope left an invisible mark, and he didn't want to collect another one. Still, something inside him persisted. He read testimonials of people who had prospered simply by changing their mindset, and wondered if it were possible for someone like him. Sometimes he even laughed to himself, thinking it all too beautiful to be true. Thinking positive and the money appears? Oh, sure, he would say wryly, trying to hide his secret wish that it were real. As he worked, these thoughts followed him like a constant echo. Between tasks, he found himself wondering, what if I'm wrong? What if the problem was always me? This doubt began to awaken something curious in him, a small sense of responsibility for his own life. Perhaps for the first time, he didn't want to blame the world. But the mind is cunning, and the fear of believing again is treacherous. At night, as he lay in bed, Sebastian found himself torn between two voices, one telling him to keep trying, and another whispering that it was a waste of time. This silent battle left him exhausted, but also more aware. The seed had been planted, and even though he doubted, it was beginning to germinate. And it was in this mixture of skepticism and curiosity that something unexpected happened. A small, almost unimportant gesture that would become the first step in his transformation. One ordinary morning, Sebastian decided he would do something different. He grabbed an old notebook, one of those forgotten ones at the bottom of a drawer, and wrote on the cover, "My New Life." He didn't quite know what he was doing, but something was guiding him. He wrote a few simple sentences, like, "I am prosperous, my life is changing, and money comes to me easily." At first, it seemed like a game, an innocent joke, but a part of him took it more seriously than he cared to admit. He started waking up 10 minutes earlier every day. He would sit quietly, take deep breaths, and try to imagine a different version of himself. He would close his eyes and see a bright house, a peaceful smile, bills paid, a sense of peace. At first, it was difficult to stay focused. His mind still kept reminding him of his debts and uncertainties. Still, he kept going. After work, he repeated the ritual. He wrote down 3 things he was grateful for, however small. The hot coffee in the morning, the unexpected ride, a colleague's smile. At first, it felt forced, but little by little, he began to feel something different. It was as if, by giving thanks, his soul breathed easier. Life, somehow, seemed less burdensome. Even without concrete results, Sebastian noticed a slight change in the way he approached the day. Things were still far from ideal, but there was a new calm in his gaze. As if for the first time, he wasn't just reacting to life, he was participating in it. And as I continued this new habit, something subtle began to happen. Small coincidences, unlikely encounters, and discrete opportunities began to emerge, almost like silent answers from the universe. As the days passed, the visualization began to take on color, texture, and feeling. Sebastian no longer saw just vague images, he felt the scenes. In his mind, he walked through a spacious house, lit by open windows and the soft scent of fresh coffee. He could hear the sound of footsteps on the hardwood floor, feel the breeze on the porch, and the warmth of the sun streaming through the curtains. It was so real that for moments, he completely forgot the reality around him. He saw himself smiling, at peace, free from debt and worry. He visualized prosperity not as something distant, but as if it were already part of his routine. With each mental detail, emotion grew within him, as if the universe were inviting him to truly believe. That feeling of lightness was addictive. His body relaxed, his mind quieted, and hope took shape. He soon realized that imagination was more than a pastime. It was a rehearsal for the life he wanted to live. And the more he indulged, the more natural it became. It wasn't effort, it was pleasure. He learned to close his eyes and let his heart guide the images, unhurriedly, without fear of looking foolish. It was like visiting, every day, a future already awaiting him. Sometimes, while riding the bus to work, he would find himself smiling as he imagined himself driving his own car, listening to his favorite music, going to important meetings. These scenes began to infiltrate his days. Until dreaming ceased to be an escape, it became a silent exercise in faith. And it was in this state of surrender that the universe began to respond in subtle, almost imperceptible ways, but enough to make Sebastian realize that something bigger was at work. That's when the coincidences started to appear. At first, Sebastian thought it was just chance, everyday things. But the more he paid attention, the more he realized something was different. An old friend contacted him to offer a work partnership, something simple, but it seemed to come at just the right time. Days later, he received an email about a free finance course, exactly the kind of knowledge he'd been wanting to learn. These small signs began to recur. A book on prosperity appeared in a bookstore, at a discount, right on the shelf he never usually looked at. A line in the advertisement read, "You attract what you believe," and it made him smile, remembering his recent visualizations. It was as if the universe was playing tricks, leaving clues along the way, testing his attention. At first, he wondered if it was all just a figment of his imagination, but at the same time, a sense of synchronicity grew within him. Things seemed to fall into place more fluidly. Problems that had previously caused him despair now resolved themselves in unexpected, almost magical ways. Even the moods of those around him seemed lighter when he was around. These small manifestations filled him with curiosity and confidence. It was as if the universe were saying quietly, "Keep going, you're on the right path." And for the first time, Sebastian began to believe that life could truly conspire in favor of those who believe. And it was in this rhythm of discoveries that he realized that the true power of the law of attraction was not just in the signs, but in the silent transformation that was already beginning to happen within him. As the weeks passed, Sebastian began to realize something subtle but powerful. The world around him seemed the same, the streets, the work, the people, but inside him, everything was different. Before, he saw life as a battlefield. Now, he saw it as a mirror. He realized that it wasn't the universe that needed to change for things to improve, but rather how he positioned himself in front of it. This shift in perception was like opening a window in a dark room. He understood that each thought was a seed, and that for years he had been planting scarcity without realizing it. He then began to choose more carefully what he cultivated in his mind. Whenever a negative thought arose, he replaced it with a lighter, more constructive one. It wasn't easy. Sometimes the old mind tried to take over, but he learned to observe without getting lost. Over time, the habit became second nature. He began to speak to himself differently, more kindly, more confidently. He stopped repeating phrases like, "This isn't for me," and started saying, "I can learn, I can achieve." It was a small change, but it changed everything. The tone of his words seemed to shift the weight of the world. This new way of thinking was reflected in his actions. Sebastian began to act with more calmness, with less fear of failure. He stopped comparing himself so much and began to focus on growth. And the more he adjusted internally, the more life responded with opportunities that seemed tailor-made. And it was in this flow of expansion that he began to understand another secret of prosperity: the power of gratitude, not just as a word, but as a state of being. Gratitude arrived quietly, almost like an unexpected visit. Sebastian began to notice that the more he gave thanks, the lighter he felt. He began to be grateful for the simple things: the hot coffee in the morning, the sun streaming through the window, a friend's hug, even the hardships that made him grow. It was curious how something so small could so profoundly change the way he saw the world. What had once seemed like a lack now began to feel like an abundance. He created a small nightly ritual. Before going to sleep, he would write down 3 good things that had happened that day in his notebook. Sometimes he had trouble remembering something, but he always found it, and little by little, this trained his eyes to see beauty where before he had only seen problems. With each written word, he felt a different peace, as if the universe were silently listening to each thank you. Gratitude began to shift the energy of the house. Conversations became lighter. The atmosphere seemed more harmonious. Even when challenges arose, he no longer reacted with despair. Instead, he took a deep breath and said, "This will teach me something too." This new attitude made problems seem smaller and solutions clearer. Over time, he noticed that the more he gave thanks, the more reasons he had to be grateful. It was as if he had found a secret code, something that unlocked the flow of life. Scarcity seemed to recede, and in its place came a constant sense of fluidity, as if everything was finally falling into place. And it was in this climate of serenity and recognition that Sebastian took the next step. He decided to completely reprogram his mind for abundance, immersing himself body and soul in a new way of thinking. Sebastian realized that thoughts had a power he had previously underestimated. He decided to completely reprogram his mind. Every day, as soon as he woke up, he would look in the mirror and say out loud, "I am prosperous. Money flows to me easily. I deserve an abundant life." At first, his voice trembled, as if his heart still didn't believe it. But gradually, the words began to gain strength, vibrating from within. He realized that affirming was more than just repeating phrases. It was declaring a new identity. Each word became a seed sown in the fertile soil of his subconscious. As he reinforced these affirmations, something changed in his gaze. There was a different confidence, a calm certainty that didn't depend on circumstances. He no longer waited to be prosperous. He began to act like someone who already was. These affirmations began to accompany him in ordinary moments, while walking to work, while cooking, even on the bus. And each time he repeated them, he felt a new energy forming, as if his mind were being cleansed of old beliefs of scarcity. It was like switching from an old frequency to a new station, more harmonious and full of possibilities. Over time, the old inner voices, the ones that said "you can't" or "this isn't for you," began to fade. They still surfaced from time to time, but Sebastian no longer heard them in the same way. He learned to recognize that they were merely echoes of the past, not truths of the present. And when that clarity set in, the universe seemed to test his new vibration, presenting situations that would challenge his faith and show whether he truly believed what he had been saying. Sebastian's path. After the first few weeks of excitement, a wave of uncertainty returned. It was as if the universe wanted to test his faith, pushing him back into old fears. Overdue bills reappeared, a work project was canceled, and for a moment, He felt his heart sink. The old voice whispered, "See, nothing's changed?" And for a moment, he almost believed it. But something was different this time. Despite his fear, he knew he couldn't give in to despair. He took a deep breath, remembered everything he had learned, and even without understanding the reason for the difficulties, chose to trust. He began to see challenges as tests, not punishments, but opportunities to prove to himself that he was ready for the new. Still, there were days when doubt spoke louder. Is all this really real? Am I fooling myself again? He wondered, staring at the ceiling in the wee hours. But instead of giving up, he spoke to his own fear, with the calm of someone speaking to an old acquaintance. "I understand you, but I won't stop." And that simple phrase kept him going. He realized that resistance wasn't the enemy. It was part of the process. It was a sign that something inside him was truly transforming. After all profound change requires detachment, and he was learning to let go of the need to control everything. The secret was to keep believing, even when the world gave no apparent reason to. And it was precisely during this period of trial that something extraordinary began to happen. Small victories began to emerge, as if life were rewarding every moment of unwavering faith. The challenging days didn't disappear, but Sebastian was no longer the same man who let them overwhelm him. He learned to walk with faith, even when the ground seemed uncertain. Instead of complaining, he took action. He created new habits, sought opportunities, and maintained his rituals of gratitude and visualization. It was like rowing against the current, but with the conviction that in the end, the river would take him exactly where he needed to go. Persistence became his new strength. Every time life pushed him back, he took a deep breath and remembered what he had learned, that results don't come from doubt, but from persistence. He began to see each obstacle as an invitation to grow, rather than a sign of failure. This shift in attitude made the impossible seem like only a temporary challenge. He also realized that acting with confidence involved much more than just waiting. It involved taking small daily actions that proved his faith. Even with little money, he began to behave like someone prosperous, organizing his finances, taking better care of his belongings, investing energy in projects that truly inspired him. The energy of abundance began to be present in the details. Over time, this inner discipline began to shape his exterior. People around him noticed his change. He spoke more calmly, walked with more presence, and his eyes sparkled in a new way. It was as if he had finally understood that prosperity is not a destination, but a state of consciousness. And it was precisely when Sebastian achieved this serenity, this mature and constant faith, that the universe decided to surprise him in a way he never expected. It was then that the transformations began to take shape. Gradually, what Sebastian had been envisioning began to manifest itself in subtle but unmistakable ways. A former colleague recommended him for a new project, something simple at first, but which soon proved promising. Then, a satisfied client recommended his work, opening doors he hadn't even imagined. Money, previously scarce, began to flow more naturally, and with it, a profound sense of entitlement. The curious thing was that nothing felt forced. Opportunities simply appeared, as if the universe were adjusting the pieces on the chessboard of life. Sebastian no longer chased things desperately. He attracted them with calm, confidence, and presence. Every unexpected gain, every favorable encounter, felt like a silent reminder that his new energy was working. Little by little, he began to see physical reflections of the prosperity he already felt internally. He was able to pay off old debts, renovate part of his house, and even help a friend in need, something that had previously seemed impossible. And most impressively, the more he shared, the more his abundance grew. Prosperity ceased to be a distant dream and began to become a lifestyle. Coincidences multiplied. The right people appeared at the right moments. Ideas fell into place like puzzle pieces, and each step seemed guided by something greater. Sebastian felt he was finally in tune with life. That old feeling of scarcity had been replaced by a profound peace, a silent certainty that he was on the right path. But the universe still had more to show. Because when the heart is aligned with abundance, miracles cease to be the exception and become part of the routine. Over time, Sebastian understood that the biggest change wasn't in his account balance, but within himself. He no longer lived with the anxiety he once had, nor the fear of losing what he had achieved. He discovered that true prosperity is an internal state, a feeling born from the balance between faith and action. He began to wake up at peace, feeling complete, even without knowing what the day would bring. This serenity was his new form of wealth. Money now was just a reflection of the harmony he carried in his heart. He realized that when he feels worthy, the universe responds in kind, frequency. It was no longer about having, but about being. This awareness transformed the way I saw everything around me: work, relationships, even challenges. Each experience became an opportunity for growth, not a burden. Sebastian's mind became a fertile garden. Instead of cultivating fear, he planted gratitude, confidence, and self-love. The old beliefs that had limited him began to fade, replaced by a gentler inner voice that told him, "You are enough." And that simple phrase set him free every day. He also noticed something profound. The more at peace he felt, the more things flowed naturally. There was no more desperate striving, no more racing against time. There was just the feeling that everything was happening at its right pace, like a song the universe was silently composing. And it was in this vibration of plenitude that Sebastian opened himself to the unexpected, a remarkable event that would come to consolidate his journey towards prosperity. One morning, while sipping coffee and reviewing notes from an old project, Sebastian had an idea. Simple, almost obvious, but it seemed to shine with a different kind of power. He picked up his notebook and began writing, guided by an inspiration that flowed as if from elsewhere. Within hours, he transformed that draft into something concrete, a proposal that could change everything. Without hesitation, he sent it to a company he'd always dreamed of working for. The following days were filled with anticipation and faith. He didn't know if he would receive a response, but unlike before, there was a calm within him. He believed. And when the reply email arrived, confirming the company's interest, Sebastian was silent for a few seconds, absorbing the moment. It was as if the universe was saying, "See, I heard you all along." The contract was signed, and with it came a new phase of prosperity. The work flourished, yielding results far beyond expectations. But more than the financial gain, what truly marked that moment was the feeling of having manifested something real, tangible, from an inner vision. He had transformed thought into matter, dream into reality. Opportunities multiplied after that. New contacts, new projects, new horizons. Everything seemed to flow with a charming naturalness, as if life had waited for the perfect moment to open its doors. Sebastian was now living what he had once only imagined, and each achievement was celebrated with gratitude and humility. But the best part was yet to come, because the true transformation wasn't just about external achievements, but also the impact this change would have on the people around them. With his success solidified, Sebastian realized his journey wasn't just about him. People began approaching, curious about his sudden change. They wanted to understand how someone who once struggled to pay the bills now lived with such ease and abundance. And he, with a calm smile, explained, not magic formulas, but faith, focus, and gratitude. He said the power has always been within each of us, just dormant, waiting to be awakened. His words began to touch hearts. Friends, colleagues, and even strangers began to hear his story and feel hope again. Some began to practice what he taught, to visualize, to be grateful, to believe. And little by little, changes began to happen in their lives too. Sebastian then realized that his prosperity multiplied when shared. He created a small online group where he shared reflections and daily practices of the law of attraction. The space grew quickly, and messages of transformation began arriving from all sides. People shared how they had found new opportunities, overcome debt, and changed their mindset. Each story was like a seed that blossomed from their own journey. Sebastian's life, once marked by scarcity, now became a channel of abundance for the world. He understood that true wealth is contagious. The more it spreads, the more it grows. And the beautiful thing is that it all began with a simple thought, a small decision to change. But there was still something deeper to be understood, a reflection that would make him see, with absolute clarity, the real meaning of prosperity. One night, sitting on the porch of his house, the same one he had once envisioned in the early days of his faith, Sebastian gazed at the star-filled sky. The gentle wind touched his face, and for a moment, he allowed himself to remember everything: the debts, the sleepless nights, the doubts and fears. It all seemed so distant now, like a life that no longer belonged to him. And in the silence of that night, a thought crossed his mind. None of this would have happened if I hadn't decided to change here inside. He smiled, feeling a gratitude that couldn't be contained in his chest. He realized that the law of attraction wasn't just about attracting wealth, but about awakening consciousness. It was about learning to look within and transform what you feel before trying to transform what you see. Prosperity, he understood, is a consequence of inner peace, and that indeed is the greatest achievement of all. Sebastian, he remembered how many times he wanted to change the world around him, blaming the system, the people, fate, but he discovered that the power was always in the same place, within himself. The mind, when aligned with faith, is capable of creating universes, and he was living proof of this. The same man who once doubted everything was now living what he once dared to imagine. He silently thanked God for every obstacle, every tear, every difficult night. He realized that without them, he would never have found his way back to himself. The pain, after all, had been just the universe's nudge toward awakening, and this awareness enveloped him like an embrace. As the sky grew darker and the breeze grew cooler, Sebastian closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He felt fulfilled, at peace, as if finally everything was in its rightful place. And unbeknownst to him, that moment of gratitude would be the prelude to a new revelation about the true meaning of abundance. Sebastian's life seems like something out of a dream, but he knows none of it was a coincidence. His brightly lit house, his prosperous job, his travels, and his serene smile are reflections of what he first built within himself. He learned that the true magic of the law of attraction lies not in wishing for things, but in becoming the kind of person capable of receiving them. What was once a distant ideal is now his routine, living in tune with abundance. People come to him every day for advice, wanting to know the secret. And he, with a calm gaze, answers, "It all starts here," pointing to the heart. Because that's where the power to transform, to create, to manifest resides. He understands that when the mind believes and the heart feels, the universe conspires without resistance. And each day is a reminder that to think right is to live right. Sebastian continues to practice gratitude, not out of obligation, but out of pleasure. He knows that abundance is a flow. The more he acknowledges it, the more he grows. His days are guided by lightness, and even challenges now have a different glow, as he's learned that every obstacle is just an opportunity in disguise. Sometimes he still closes his eyes and revisits the past, not with sadness, but with admiration, because it was in scarcity that he learned to value, and in pain that he discovered the strength to believe. Every step, every mistake, every attempt was essential for the man of today to be born. And so, living the life he once only imagined, Sebastian Mitchell became more than an example of prosperity. he became living proof that the mind is the soil where destiny flourishes, and those who learn to cultivate their thoughts discover that the impossible is only what has not yet been believed. Ultimately, Sebastian Mitchell discovered something many spend their entire lives trying to understand. Prosperity isn't a destination, it's a state of consciousness. He realized that money, success, and opportunities are merely reflections of what we carry within. When he changed his thoughts, the world changed with him. When he truly believed, the universe began to respond. The law of attraction brought not only material wealth, but also profound transformation, a new way of seeing life with more lightness, faith, and purpose. And that's why, today, Sebastian lives with the certainty that nothing is impossible for those who choose to believe. He has become living proof that everything we imagine with our hearts can indeed become reality. Perhaps, right now, you're experiencing the same dilemma he once did, feeling that things aren't flowing, that your effort isn't enough. But remember, change begins with a single thought, and that thought can be the beginning of your new story. So, if this message touched you, if this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share this video. Leave a comment with your thoughts on what inspired you most today. Who knows, maybe your own journey will be the next one to be told here, because in the end, the secret is simple. When your mind opens to abundance, the entire universe moves to accompany you.